and welcome to Getting It,
the conversation where we try to understand life just that little bit more.
My name's Dan.
And my name is Subaan.
We're both medical students based in London.
And in today's episode, we talk about tennis. We give an overview of the rules and scoring system, an outline of professional tennis, and why now is the perfect time to start following it.
Good afternoon, Subaan.
Hello, hello.
How's it going?
Yeah, not too bad, I guess. Yeah. Classic response, not too bad.
Yeah.
How's it going for you?
Yeah, nothing interesting since we last recorded an episode, which was...
yesterday.
Yeah, like a day ago.
Yeah, unfortunately, it hasn't been. How's your week, Dan? The one day week.
No, so today, we're not going to have many more opportunities to record like this. We record at your house. It's quite nice. It's quite chill. Got the indoor setup today, but I'm going away in a couple of days, so we're going to try maybe and do a little burst of episodes. I mean, they're going to go out periodically anyway, but it would be good. And today I thought we could start doing a little series potentially. I don't know if I want to call it a series, just for anyone who is interested in getting to know a particular sport.
Yeah, and I guess our motivation behind why we thought about this kind of mini series, you could say, is because, I mean, in this lockdown period, because of COVID, a lot of people have probably started delving further into random things, and sports tend to be like a good one, either watching more sports or learning more about a particular sport, or even playing a sport if it's one you can kind of do on your own, like in the garden if you have one or something like that.
It's such a big part of our culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not just in the UK, but around the world. Obviously, sport, it's just something that so many people are involved in. And if you can get involved in a sport, it can bring you so much joy. I think also getting involved in playing a sport, it's nice to follow the sport as well.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes I think following the sport is better. I mean, I'm heavily biased towards basketball, but I think the basketball community is better. Like, it's the community, right? When you get involved
absolutely.
in it. The basketball community is too jokes, man. It's too savage. So,
it's really funny. To be honest, the tennis community is not quite as...
quite as lit.
I don't find the humour as funny. But the football community, for example, is quite funny online.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it's just... And the other thing is it connects you to people who otherwise you wouldn't have anything in common with. So... Yeah. It's for me personally, genuinely, sport brings me more happiness than almost anything else. Honestly.
Oh, that's quite the profound statement. But
I mean,
fair enough. No, I can definitely get where you're coming from.
And I'm not an incredible athlete, by any stretch. I mean, I'm very much an average athlete. I just enjoy playing it. I like getting better. I think it's fascinating psychologically. The amount you learn about yourself from playing a sport. I think, for example, children growing up, it is almost essential for them to try and do a sport regularly. The amount you learn about self-control, self-discipline, getting over losses, being patient, teamwork in certain sports. We all know, sports is good for teamwork. Sports, can be good for young people.
It's the classic thing you put on your CV. How do I demonstrate teamwork on my personal statement for you? I played a sport.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a commonly known fact. It's no secret. But the more I play particular sports, the more I realize in other parts of my life, genuinely, it enhances my ability to process certain pieces of information. A big one, dealing with pressure. For example, I know it's a bit of a stereotype, I don't know, but I do like my golf. And honestly, the amount that I've learned about dealing with pressure, like how to, before a big moment, say you're going up to do public speaking or something where you're classically quite nervous, I will go through the same processes that I do before a big golf shot. If I'm doing, I don't know, like the first tee in front of the clubhouse where there are people watching, having their lunch, and like you're nervous, I do the same things in my mind. Or if I messed up on a hole, getting over that anger and restarting for the next hole psychologically. Yeah. And tennis, the one we're going to talk about today, is something that I've been playing for a few years now. I'm involved in the uni tennis setup as well, and I've really, really, really just fallen in love with the sport over the last few years. And I think not only is it very physically challenging because you have to have strength, stamina, speed. It's a very technical sport. You need a high IQ, a tennis IQ to be a good player. You can't just be very physical. You need to be very careful with your shot selection. But I also love how every tennis player has their own philosophy, their own way of approaching the game and winning matches. Even on the ATP tour, there's not like one hack which makes you a great player. The top 5 players, the top 10 players, all approach the sport in very different ways. It means that every matchup is completely different. And I just think it's fascinating. And not only is it physically difficult, but it's also very mentally challenging because it's all on you. It's not a team sport. You leave it all out there physically on your own. and you have to deal with anything. You know, you don't get coaching, for example. You're not allowed to get coaching during matches. So your coach can be in the stadium, in the ATP and the professional tennis. They can be in the stadium watching their player, but they're not allowed to say anything to the player.
Really? Why is that? Just has that always been a rule?
It's always been a rule.
Oh, fair enough.
So in Wimbledon, any tournament that you watch, if a player has just finished the first set, the first hour of playing, and they're playing really badly, and the coach is like, oh, just stand back.
Yeah, so it's like a polar opposite to something like, say, boxing, where it's like, you know, you got your coaches and your team shouting like whilst you're throwing punches, basically.
It's a different approach. I mean, both are interesting, and you could do it the other way around in both sports. In boxing, it would be interesting to see someone have to figure out tactics throughout the fight on their own.
Oh yeah.
Or in tennis, it would be interesting to have the coaching and see them getting the other perspectives, because sometimes you don't realize something, you know, that while you're playing yourself that they see. So that's why tennis is so interesting. You see someone going through a psychological journey every match. And every match is so different. So it's a really, really fascinating sport. And hopefully in the next half hour, 40 minutes or whatever, we can kind of get you up to speed, I suppose, to an extent on the current sort of tennis world, I guess, the main players, the main rules, how the calendar works, because tennis is an annual, it goes from, how do you say it? It just goes from January to the end of the year, every year. The season runs on the calendar.
Oh, right.
And it just restarts every year. So yeah, it can be quite complex.
I think that's actually quite a big thing. I think for any sport, like when you start getting into a sport, it's quite hard to kind of initially, it does depend on the sport, but I think tennis is particularly hard because, I mean, I've kind of absorbed a decent amount of tennis information from you just, you know, by osmosis. But yeah, I still don't really understand, you know, the whole tournament system, all the points and ranks, points as in like, you know, personal, like, you know, ranking and stuff rather than the actual game points. But yeah, but say other sports, say like basketball, when I started getting into basketball, I'd played basketball for a while, but I didn't really follow like the NBA or anything for a while. But when I did start getting into the NBA, I found it a lot easier to kind of get into. Maybe it's just because I understood and knew the sport better. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's just far less complex. It's like you've got the NBA, and that's like, you know, 90% of it. And all you need to do is just understand the structure and the timings and you know, the way the NBA works, really. Whereas with tennis, correct me if I'm wrong, there's like 4 different like tournaments or grand opens or whatever they're called that are going on like all across the world, and they have like give like different points in different ways or something. Or
yes, we will
I can
go
see you
down this
smirking
rabbit hole.
Wow, you're so dumb, you're so lost.
No, not at all. No, not at all. Because I was like that too, and I think unless you really get into it, it does get confusing, and I still get confused by certain elements of it. And another thing which is quite confusing is women's tennis is very popular. And you get equal prize money to men's tennis. But interestingly, which is obviously a very good thing, but interestingly, the women's calendar is very different to the men's calendar. The tournaments, apart from the Grand Slams, the tournament setup is completely different. So if you wanted to follow women's tennis and men's tennis, you'd have to be following 2 completely different schedules, 2 completely different formats.
Why? Just quickly, why? I guess it will be going off on a bit of a tangent.
I suppose it's historical. It's just the way that things have developed over time.
Oh, okay.
I mean, tennis has been professional for about 60 years now. And I guess it's a unique, out of the major sports, it's quite unique in that women's tennis is very sort of prominent. And it's really good because, in the tennis world, you end up becoming quite familiar with the women and men's players. Even if you only like, for example, men's tennis, really, you end up following a lot of women's tennis too. And it's good how the Grand Slams are held at the same time. So the storylines, you can follow both storylines at once. You know, at Wimbledon, the men's final, the women's final, all the rounds are happening around the same time. So that's really good. But that can be, I suppose that would be a good episode to do at some point in the future. Whereas for now, we'll try and give an overview of the current tennis world. I'll be talking about men's tennis just because it's the side of tennis that I follow the most. So we'd have to bring in a women's tennis expert for the women's tennis calendar because, as I said, they're quite different. And I don't think I'd be able to do it justice. Yeah,
and I think just the topic of tennis is quite good, like I said before. One, because I guess people have just been getting into different sports and just different activities. So it's a good way to just kind of learn and get up to scratch and like start actually following the sport rather than just playing as well. But then I think tennis in the lockdown period, obviously a lot of sports like, you know, football and stuff, people just really haven't been doing, at least, you know, people, I think they're starting now and stuff.
Yeah.
But before you couldn't do that just because of the restrictions. But tennis is actually something people have been doing. Tennis hasn't really been affected too much because it's naturally it's just socially distant sport for the most part. Well, you know, when you're playing and stuff. Because some of my dad's friends, like actually started playing tennis like a decent amount, and that was quite funny to me because it's like, you know, Pakistani dads, like middle-aged Pakistani dads, like, can you imagine them playing tennis? Not a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
and exactly, like, so they probably know nothing about, like, you know, my dad watches Wimbledon when it comes up and stuff. I mean, so do I, but I guess he doesn't really know how the sport works in terms of the whole ranking system, and just the history and the proper rules of the sport and everything just related to it.
In many ways, it is a bit of an inaccessible. It is relatively inaccessible compared to other major sports, and that's a big downfall of tennis. I mean, there's a history of it being an elitist sport, like with golf, for example, but. And yeah, I think that brings some barriers. So you get, I don't know, a lot of people who don't feel very interested in the sport because, yeah, they never did it when they were younger, and the tennis world is quite complicated in some ways. So yeah, hopefully we can shed some light on that. And
by we, he means himself.
No, it will be good to get both perspectives. But yeah, okay. So should we start by just giving a quick overview of the rules if people?
Yeah, you really have to stop saying we, because my contribution from this point onwards is basically going to be 0. So
okay, so everyone, let's buckle up and
let's go.
We're doing freestyle. So yeah, the rules of tennis. Firstly, we'll go from top to bottom. So the biggest aspect of each match is it's decided between whoever gets the most sets. So in a Grand Slam, it's played as best of 5 sets. So you need first to 3.
Define set.
Good question. So, a set. Oh, we're going to do it this way. So a set is first to 6 games.
Define game.
First to 4 points.
Okay. Yeah.
That's not strictly correct, but yeah. In a set, you have to accumulate. You have to win by 2, and you have to get to 6 games. So. How I like to usually explain it is by giving an example. Say I'm playing you. Yep. I will serve first, right? Let's say I serve first.
Mm-hmm.
I will play out a game where every point I'm serving.
Okay.
You're receiving serve. I'm doing the serves.
Yep.
Which gives me an advantage, right? Because if I'm a professional top player, I'll probably have a very good serve.
Yep.
Every point is being started by me smashing in a serve. And I think people know about like the 15 love, 30 love. That's each individual game. So it will go 15, say I win each point. It will go 15 love to me, then the next point, 30 love to me, next point, 40 love to me, then I've won a game.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's your turn to serve.
Okay, yeah.
Let's say you're also very good at serving. 15 love, 30 love, 40 love, game.
Yep.
1-1.
Yep.
1-1 in games. That will, let's just say both of us are really good at serving and both of us are terrible at returning.
Okay.
It will go all the way up to 4-all, say.
Yeah.
Then I'm serving again, and I don't know, 15 love, 30 love. Then, you start suddenly getting better at returning, and you make it 30-15, 30-all. Then, say you win the next point, it'll be 30-40.
Mm-hmm.
That's called a break point. Breaks are really important in tennis. You have the chance there, if you win the next point, to break my serve. Does that make sense?
Because if I win that game that you are serving in currently,
it will become 5-4 in games.
Ah, yes. Okay, yeah.
And then you're serving next.
And then, I imagine that's quite a psychological point as well.
Yeah, it's very psychological. If you've got a weaker serve, for example, it becomes a vulnerability, a massive vulnerability. Nearly every single player in the top 50, top 100, every professional tennis player pretty much has to have an extremely good and solid serve, because you base your game around your serve for the most part. That's the only shot in the match that you control, right? If I'm serving, I can decide exactly where to put that serve. I can decide how fast to make it. That's the one that you can't control. Only I'm in control of that. So let's say you do break me there. 5-4 to you. You have a very good serve. You're still serving well. You go 15, 30, 40 love, and then you win that game. You then
won that set.
You then won the set.
Yeah.
The thing is, in tennis, the next set, it doesn't matter if you beat me 6 love or a really close 6-4. The next set starts from scratch again.
Yeah.
So I have the chance to completely recover. It's really interesting. Whereas in most sports, in basketball, if at halftime you're winning, 75-30, you go into the second half, they have to make up all of that loss, all of those losses.
Yeah.
In tennis, if you smash me 6 love, it makes no difference. The second set will start again, start
Yeah.
from scratch. That's why it can be so painful if you play out a really close set that you think you should have won, and then you lose that set really tight. You start again. You have to fight. You have to start from
square one.
scratch.
Yeah.
You're a whole set down now.
It's like dying in a game and just going all the way back to the checkpoint, like kind of thing. But the
Yeah.
checkpoint being the start. So
It's really, really challenging. So yeah, as I was saying, you have to in a Grand Slam get to 3 sets to win the match. Sets can be very long. Tennis matches can be 4 or 5 hours sometimes because sets are like matches within themselves. You know.
Yeah. Wait. So sorry. So to win like the overall thing, you need what, 3 sets?
In a Grand Slam, in a men's Grand Slam match, you need to win 3 sets. So it's best of 5 sets
Okay.
to win a match.
Is it first to 3?
Yes, first to 3.
Oh yeah.
So say it's 2 sets
yeah.
all. You go into the final set. That's the deciding set.
Okay.
Another caveat, which is worth noting before we move on in the rules of a match, is that if neither of us break each other, if we both hold our serves and it goes to 4-all, and then I go up to 5-4, then you hold serve 5-all, then I hold serve 6-5.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't be fair because I've had more service games than you.
Yeah.
So then you get a chance to even it up 6-all. At that point, you then do a tie break. A tie break will decide the set, and it's very simple. It's just first to 7 points. We won't go into like the serving pattern for it, but it's basically for the most part you get 2 serves each in a row. I serve 2.
Okay. Yeah.
That will decide the set. So again, the psychological challenge of going into a tie break. You've been playing for an hour and 20 minutes. Nothing could separate you. It's now 6-all. Now it's just down to 7 points. That will decide that whole set. What's crazy, in my opinion, is it's first to 7 points. If it's 5-all, I know, or let's say it's 6-5 to me, if I win that next point, that's the whole set that I've just won.
Yeah.
I'm 1 point away from winning the whole set, and it's 6-5 to me. If you win the next point, it's then 6-all. We are completely even in the whole set.
Mm.
Do you see what I mean? When you get to the deep end of a tiebreaker, that's where you have to be insanely clutch because you are so close to losing the whole set or winning the whole set. And a set is so valuable and you have to fight so hard for it.
And that can basically go on forever almost.
It could go on. Sometimes you get insane tiebreakers.
Yeah, that's why some like tennis matches are like 8 hours long and stuff.
The longest tennis match was at Wimbledon. The deciding set didn't used to go to a tiebreaker in Wimbledon at all. So it would just be games. You'd have to break serve to win the match. You'd have to break serve. And at Wimbledon on grass, it's very hard to break serve because the surface is very quick. We'll talk about the surfaces in a bit. It went up to 70-68.
Wow.
Yeah, it was because both players had really, really good serves. So I'm just going to see exactly how long it was. It was in 2010 at Wimbledon. The match went on for it was played over 3 different days, and the match took over 11 hours to finish.
Wait, this was fairly recent, or
2010 at Wimbledon.
Yeah.
So it went to 5 sets, and in the final set, the score was 70-68. It was ridiculous. They've imposed a rule now to stop things like that happening.
Wow.
They imposed a rule. Yeah.
I mean, whoever got tickets for that match got their bang for the buck, like right there.
Yeah, that
11-hour game.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. So yeah. Anyway,
just quickly. So seeing how much of an advantage it is to like start with the serve, how do they decide who starts serving?
So in theory,
in that first match,
in the first game of the match,
yeah.
Well, in theory, you shouldn't really have an advantage because you should both have an equal number of service games, and if you don't get broken, if I serve first, then you serve.
Yeah, okay.
Because you have to win by 2, right?
Yeah.
It's just like in a penalty shootout in football. It's fairly level. The only difference would be probably psychological. If you get broken first, then it's a bigger disadvantage or something. I don't know. You're on the back foot straight away. Yeah, but overall, in theory, there shouldn't be a difference. You don't have less chances or anything like that. So, yeah, one way to see tennis is just each set is like a match within itself. And that's probably a quick overview of the rules of the point system.
Yeah.
And I think the basic rules of how you win a point are quite well known. If you serve it into the server's box, and then
don't hit outside the lines.
Don't let it bounce twice.
The lines.
Don't hit the net, and don't let it miss. Yeah, and go outside the court.
Don't be bad, bro. That's
just be good. Just don't hit it out. It's very simple. Just don't hit it out. Get anything back. And I suppose that's where you get into the philosophy of how to approach the game, because you have some players who are really aggressive. They have, for example, a really big serve. Tall players have a massive advantage with their serve because, it's quite
Physics.
obvious. Yeah, because physics. But then if you are tall, you're probably not as mobile. So the tall players like to play very aggressive tennis. They like to end the points as quickly as possible. Whereas some players, the guys, for example, brought up in Southern Europe who play a lot on clay court, because as we're kind of alluding to different surfaces. If you're like a Spanish, I don't know, like a Nadal, who he loves just running down every ball, super fit, super agile, super fast. He doesn't base his game around his serve. That's not too important for him. Someone like Nadal, he will win the match by breaking serve, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
He will get broken comparatively quite a lot. He will lose service games quite a lot, but he will also win. He will break the opponent quite a lot as well in their service games. Whereas someone like those guys who won the Wimbledon, who did the really long match at Wimbledon, John Isner, the guy who won that match, he has pretty much the best serve in the history of tennis. He's 6'10", so he could be pretty much a centre in the NBA.
What the hell?
He has a huge serve. He's not too mobile, and he bases his game basically on making points as short as possible. So you can imagine he doesn't break the opponent's serve very much, but it is very hard for the opponent to break his serve. So actually, most of his sets go to a tie break because he's always holding serve, but he's not breaking them very much.
Yeah.
You see? Whereas with Rafa, or Rafa's an extreme example because he's incredible, but whereas a lot of baseline sort of grind players who just kind of grind out points, they will lose their serve a lot, but they will also get the opponent's service games a lot.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of different philosophies in the sport, which is really fascinating, and you have your own style that you develop as well as a player yourself. So yeah, I guess we could talk about that, or we could go into the tournament setup. I don't know what you'd prefer.
I have like zero knowledge of the tournament setup, so I think that's a good way to inform me that little bit more.
Okay, so the first thing which I think people are most aware of is that in tennis there are Grand Slams, 4 per year. There's the Australian Open first, then the French Open, then Wimbledon, which is in London. I think Wimbledon's probably the best known Grand Slam, maybe just because we're in the UK, but it's the oldest Grand Slam as well. And then you have the US Open just afterwards, sort of towards the end of summer. The Australian Open and the US Open are played on a hard court, so the surface of the court is hard. The French Open...
Wait, is hard like concrete or...
no, it's...
is that weird kind of hard...
Like acrylic...
Like, almost like sports hall material. Not like the wooden sports hall, but like the fake inside sports... I don't know how to describe it. What?
I'll try and see... hard, because there are different types of hard court within itself. So the actual surface in the Australian Open is slightly different to the US Open surface.
Oh.
And I'm just looking it up right now. It says that... I don't know. I don't want to get it wrong. So if you're interested, you can check it out, the exact type of hard court. But the surface is hard. So it's seen as quite a neutral surface. Then you've got the French Open, which is played on a clay court. Clay court is very unique, and you end up with players who become clay court specialists. On a clay court, the serve is not as important. The most important thing in a clay court is your movement around the ball, because the clay grips the ball. When the ball bounces on clay, the ball bounces up, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Wait, so on clay, so it grips the ball, so it bounces up.
It's seen as it's called a slow court. So...
Oh, right, because it...
If I hit a really hard shot into the corner, as it bounces, it's not going to skid across the surface. It's going to grip the ground and bounce up. So you've got a better chance of running that ball down and getting to it.
Yeah.
Whereas,
and so I guess the effects of spins are going to be amplified.
Yes,
Spin is amplified
exactly.
on that, yeah.
So if you watch the best clay court player ever, Nadal, he puts an insane amount of topspin on each shot. It's insane to look up the stats. It's thousands of reps per minute on his shots. It's incredible. And the whole way he hits the ball, you can see he's designed to play on a clay court. He doesn't go through the ball. His follow through on a forehand is above his head.
Oh, wow. What the hell?
Because he's going completely up on the ball to generate as much topspin as possible. It's incredible to watch how he does it. And that is insanely useful on clay, because if he hits that shot, the ball is going to bounce so high. The opponent has to hit the ball at such a high point. It's so difficult and unnatural to hit it from that position.
Yeah.
So his game on clay is perfect. And that's why, for example, Federer has struggled so much against Nadal. Even when Nadal was very young, Federer found it almost impossible to compete with Nadal on clay because Federer has a one-handed backhand, which if you hit the ball with a backhand with one hand, it's harder to deal with a high ball because it's so unnatural. Nadal it was like a cheat code. Nadal would just hit to his backhand, just very spinny shots to his backhand. Federer just could not deal with it, simply. Yes. And yeah, anyway, so the French Open is played on clay, so you won't be surprised to know that Nadal has won 12 French Opens.
In what period of time?
So,
or just is that just unheard of in general? I have no scale for this.
I'll quickly take you through Nadal's French Open experience. So his first French Open was in 2005. He was 19. He just turned 19 for it, and he won his first one.
Oh, okay.
And then the next year, he won against Federer. The next year, he won against Federer. The next year, he won against Federer. The year after, he lost his first ever French Open match
against
Robin Soderling. It's
never heard of him.
it was a big upset, but there's a lot of 2009 was a weird season for Rafa. He had a few injuries, and
fair enough.
A lot of people say he wasn't at his best. But anyway,
excuses coming out.
No, you maybe got to see that I was a bit biased towards Rafa, but yeah. Anyway, 2010, he won it.
Okay.
2011,
won it.
2012.
I think he won it.
2013,
won it.
Indeed, and in 2014.
He won it?
Indeed. He had a couple of bad years in 2015 and 16 in general. He didn't win any Grand Slams those years. But 2017, won it. 2018, won it. Last year, won it. It's insane
so
dominance.
Just like an auto win, basically.
Bearing in mind, 128 players enter in each Grand Slam tournament.
Yeah.
The amount of consistency you need for that is just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's quite disgusting, really.
His win record is in the high 90s. It's just incredible. His winning rate is in the high 90s at the French Open. Anyway, that's the clay court
90s
tournament.
As in like total or percent? Or
his winning percentage.
Oh, percentage, okay.
And yeah, and he's only ever lost 2 matches at the French Open. So
and those were the finals? Or?
One was against Djokovic in 2015, and one that was that match against Soderling. So you get players who are very oriented towards clay court in particular, or grass court. Talk about grass court quickly. That's the next Grand Slam, so it's the third.
Just before that, so the hard court material is typically asphalt or concrete covered with that acrylic material. That was it.
Yeah.
It's the acrylic. So yeah, because it's not like entirely hard. Like you could, it's that kind of material you can like dig your nail in and create like a scratch mark in.
Yes,
so it's
exactly.
got a very slight cushioning, but I guess to protect from like major grazing, I guess you get like burns on it instead.
Yeah,
but
and it means that you can be a bit creative with how you want the ball to bounce. So some tournaments like to have a slow hard court, which someone like Rafa would prefer, or some have a very fast hard court, especially on indoor surfaces where the ball skids. So the third Grand Slam of the year is Wimbledon. Usually happens early July. That is the only Grand Slam that's held on grass court. Grass court, the ball skids. So, it doesn't bounce as much. It's very fast court. So players with a big serve, for example, if you've got a really fast serve, if you're serving to me and your serve is huge, and when it bounces, it's not bouncing much. It's so hard to deal with. So you end up with a lot of players who do serve and volley, for example. Not so much these days, but people who serve and then come up to the net. And it's a very different philosophy. It's very interesting to watch players who are grass court specialists. There are not many tournaments which are held on grass court, interestingly. But yeah, that's a surface that Roger Federer famously has been very good on. And yeah, he's won 8 Wimbledons. So he's been very dominant in his own right.
Did he train like growing up on grass or?
No. Interestingly, so he grew up in Switzerland. He played mainly on hard courts, I believe. So it just so happens that his game, to be honest, these days, you have most players at the top are all court specialists, or that's not the right word for it, but they're good on all surfaces.
Yeah.
So for example, Nadal, Federer and Djokovic, it's incredible. They have all won every single Grand Slam. So Federer and Djokovic have also won the French Open before, the clay court slam, and Nadal has also won at Wimbledon twice. They become good on all surfaces, but Federer's game in particular just suits grass really nicely. He's very good at volleying. He's very good at coming to the net. He's very creative. He's got an incredible serve. So overall, yeah, I mean,
yeah, I think so. Obviously, all like, you know, professional tennis players are very high IQ, but whenever, like, obviously I'm not coming at it with a trained eye whenever I'm watching tennis, but when I watch Federer, it's just like, it's so calculated whenever I watch him play. He seems so IQ, it's unbelievable. It's like the Einstein almost, like in terms of the way he's playing just with his IQ. Obviously, obviously everyone else there also has incredibly high tennis IQ, and they're obviously playing with as much kind of, thought to it in terms of their game plan and everything. But when I watch Federer, like, just hitting the ball back and forth, it just seems so perfectly calculated.
He's an absolute genius. Many people still consider him to be the greatest of all time. He's won the most Grand Slams as of when we're recording this. He's won 20 Grand Slams. But the whole story of Federer, Nadal and Djokovic is incredible.
But Federer's quite a bit older, isn't he?
Yeah, so Federer turns 39 this year.
What?
Yeah.
When was the last Grand Slam he won, like last year? Or?
He was in the final of a Grand Slam last year. He was in the Wimbledon final. That was a very dramatic match.
Is that normal, that age? Like, because obviously, like, if you look at something like football or basketball, like by the time you get like 28, it's like your career or just by age is almost turning off at that point.
Not at all. It's incredible what he's done, but it's also incredible what Nadal is doing and what Djokovic is doing.
It's kind of like what LeBron has done as well with his, body and keeping at such a high level.
It's something that's happening in all sports. I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo is still playing at a very high level and he's 35. So in a lot of sports, I guess it's just a question of conditioning, and these days...
The science these days behind it.
Yeah, a lot more advanced. But someone like Federer, he plays such efficient tennis. He's so easy on his body. He doesn't have to work his body very hard when he's playing because he's so aggressive. He comes to the net, the points are short, and it's so fluid to watch. Someone like Nadal, I would say, is more miraculous because he plays... He sprints down every ball. He pushes his body to the limits, and he's now 34, and he's still... Right now, he's second best player in the world. He's defending 2 Grand Slams currently. It's incredible what Nadal has done. And yeah, all 3 of them are just unbelievable. Currently, Federer has 20 Grand Slams. So he's won those 4 Grand Slams. He's won a total of 20 times with 8 Wimbledons, 5 US Opens. He's won 1 French Open. And how much is left? I think it's won 7 Australian Opens. But yeah, he's mainly considered the GOAT probably. And then you've got Nadal, who's on 19. He is just one behind. So this year...
And he's considerably younger.
Exactly. So Nadal, he just has to win a couple more French Opens, which...
Yeah. I mean, if he just wins one extra, like if he gets 21 and then Nadal or Federer doesn't really get anything, it's like, GOAT territory is getting very competitive.
It is very competitive. So Nadal has a very good shot of getting to 20 at least.
Who's the next up? Djokovic. And
Djokovic is younger and he's currently world number 1. Before COVID, he hadn't lost a single match this year. So
that was disgusting. In such a isolated one-on-one sport, that's pretty disgusting.
So in my personal opinion, I've tried to stay neutral. In my personal opinion, Djokovic is actually the greatest tennis player ever.
Wow.
But that's up for debate. And
I guess I know which bandwagon to join.
Yeah, I mean, he's the youngest, and he's on 17 Grand Slams already. So
what?
Yeah.
Wait, I mean, how old is he again?
21. No, I'm joking.
21?
No, he is 33. So
wow.
He's just a year behind, but physically he's shown no signs of slowing down yet.
Yeah. Oh, you showed me a bit like some of his videos and stuff. He's very like, guru zen kind of about his body and maintaining health and stuff. So
he is.
That's going to play a fairly decent factor because
since 2011, he's had a very, very particular routine. He looks after his body immensely. And yeah, some people don't really agree with it because he's seen as being quite extreme and he kind of goes on sort of
biohacker level.
Yeah, he goes into very niche territory with the way he lives his life. But at the same time, you can best believe he looks after his body and he really cares about that. So and it shows physically he's in incredible condition and it's likely he'll keep going. So anyway, I'll wrap up that little race for the most Grand Slams thing. But yeah, so you have those 4 Grand Slams and Wimbledon's the 3rd one. The last one is the US Open, played about a month after. That's on hard court and that's played in New York. And so, yeah, the Grand Slams are over by August, basically, every year. You've got the Australian Open in January, the French Open in early June, Wimbledon early July, and then in August, you've got late August, early September, you've got the US Open.
So tennis players are just playing all year round?
That's another thing.
What?
They're traveling around the whole world, constantly playing tournaments, constantly changing surface. Honestly, when you watch someone playing on clay, and then Wimbledon is a month after, you have to go, even the way you run on the court is completely different. On clay, you slide across the court.
Yeah. Wow.
Wimbledon, you don't slide anywhere near as much. The way you hit each ball is different. So,
I mean, even just running, like, okay, forget the entire, like, each person is probably going to have a different game plan, different playing style on every single thing. So that's something you're going to have to change your whole psyche about whenever you're going into a different place. But even down to the level of, like, running on clay, like, or like running on, it's all, like, I guess, somewhat similar to sand. Yeah, your biomechanics are completely different in terms of running on sand compared to grass or like concrete almost. So, wow.
Even the technique for every shot has to be different. So, or even the shots that you make, You know, like volleying on. You don't make as many slice shots, for example. I would say on clay, you do a massive amount of ground strokes, forehands, backhands from the very back of the court on clay. When you're playing at Wimbledon, when you're playing on grass, you approach the whole match completely differently. So yeah, that's really fascinating, and it's really fascinating, for example, watching a grass court specialist playing a clay court specialist on hard court, because hard court's like the middle ground. The ball is in the middle in terms of pace. You can, it's just really interesting. So yeah, I'll move on to the next bit, which is sort of how the rest of the calendar works, and then maybe we can wrap it up. I don't know how long I've been talking.
I mean, it says like 40 minutes right now, but I think we were like just recording and like for no reason, like for 10 minutes at the beginning. But
okay, so maybe if we talk a bit about the calendar, and then
go ahead. Again, by we you mean you mean you.
We'll just give a bit of an overview of the rest of the calendar. So you have the Grand Slams. That's where most people stop watching, because those are really interesting. That's where a lot of the legacy comes from in tennis. One of the first things you ask when you're talking about any great players, how many slams do they have? That's like the pinnacle of the sport. But there are a lot of other tournaments which are really important. In tennis, another thing that you could argue is the end goal for every player is to get to world number one. It's a very big thing, because the way a tournament is designed is you're seeded. So at Wimbledon, remember I was saying that you get 128 players who enter every tournament?
Yep.
How do you decide who plays who first? Because what if you're pulling it out of a hat and Djokovic has to play Federer in the first round?
Yeah.
It's not right, because the people in the final would not necessarily be the best player. So
because one of the big three are just like knocked out straight away.
So you have to keep them.
If they were in a different group, they'd be knocking out the not so good players.
Exactly. So what you have to do is organize a setup where the best players are avoiding each other and they playing each other at the end. You want the final to be genuinely between the two best players in the whole tournament. So what you do is throughout the year, you're accumulating points in the smaller tournaments as well to get a higher seeding for every tournament you play, a higher ranking. Because if you're the number one ranked player, you don't have to play other highly ranked players until the end of the tournament.
Okay, so these smaller tournaments, so these aren't these Grand Slams or like the US Open or anything. How do you have the time to even play those as well to rank up your points kind of thing?
Dude, it's crazy. If you want, you have some players who just have a bit...
They just play all like
nutty energy. Like the guys in their early 20s or mid 20s, some of them are pretty much playing every week in a different country on a different surface in a completely different tournament throughout the whole year.
And it's probably necessary for most people early on in their career to, rank themselves up, get their name for themselves. And
so someone like the big three, who I keep going back to, they have the luxury now of not playing as many tournaments. They have to be careful with their schedule. They're older now. Their bodies they need time to recover. So for example, the best example probably, Federer skipped the clay court season for 3 years.
Wow.
He just didn't play it at all. He didn't play a single clay court match, because we're talking about the fact you have to go through a massive change. It's also really physically demanding. If you just cut that out, you've cut out a whole massive stressful part of the year. Just don't play it at all. Yeah. So that time of the year he'd have off. So he'd come back for the grass court season fresh.
Yeah, and that's his forte as well. So
because he's really good, he will get enough points to keep a high ranking just from playing Wimbledon, just from playing the grass court tournaments.
Yeah.
Whereas a lower player will get a lot less points and have to do a lot more tournaments to keep a decent ranking.
Yeah, you've got to start from the bottom to get to the top.
You've got to start from the bottom to get to the top. Absolutely. So
just on a side note, I know you know more about golf than me. Is it a similar thing in golf? Because obviously that's still a very isolated one-on-one kind of sport in the games and matches or whatever.
Not to the same extent, because in golf, so if 128 players are entering a tournament, you're playing your own rounds. You're not playing against anyone else. So it doesn't matter if you're playing before or after the world number one, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
In tennis, the seeding is really important. If you're a low-ranked player, you might have to play Federer or Nadal or someone at the start of the tournament, and you're just going to go out. It's just unlucky for you.
Yeah.
Whereas in golf, it's literally just who can finish 4 rounds of golf with the lowest total score. So it doesn't matter if you're the best player in the world or the 100th best player in the world. You, in theory, have an equal chance of doing well.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, but it's a very fair question. And so I'll quickly talk about the point distribution. So you're playing for ranking points. If you win a Grand Slam in men's tennis, you win 2,000 points. That's the highest tier of points that you can get. The next highest is the ATP finals, where you can win 1,500 points.
What's ATP? Because I just automatically think of like, adenosine triphosphate.
Oh yeah,
so.
that actually gets me sometimes. So it stands for Association of Tennis Professionals.
Okay.
That's just men's tennis, basically. So the ATP finals, at the end of the year, the top 8 ranked players play in a tournament only against each other. And the winner of that has won the ATP finals. It's the last tournament of the year. It's been held in London for the last few years, so I've been able to go.
Yeah, you went, yeah.
Yeah, so I've seen some decent matches there, but I think I'm cursed though, because every time I've seen Nadal, he's lost.
No.
But and he doesn't lose many matches. But yeah, anyway, so that's the next tier. You win 1,500 points if you win that tournament. Then you have Masters 1,000 tournaments. If you win that, you get 1,000 points. Now that is a lot of points. It is really good if you can win an ATP Masters 1000. Again, the big three, those 3 guys dominate those tournaments as well. And those tournaments, interestingly, there's no Masters 1000 tournament on grass. All of the Masters 1000 tournaments are either on clay or hard court. Nadal and Djokovic have the two most...
So are there multiple of these tournaments?
So
like in a single year, or does it like alternate? Oh,
so
okay.
every year, for example, there's a Masters 1000 tournament at, for example, Miami. That's just part of the tennis calendar.
Oh.
Or for example, there's one at Paris. There's one in Cincinnati in America. There are a few across the world. There's one in Shanghai. So all of the best players in the world enter into the Masters 1000 tournaments too. So obviously everyone enters into Grand Slams. Everyone enters into Masters 1000 tournaments. But and if you win a Masters 1000 tournament, it's really good. But yeah, then beneath a Masters 1000 tournament, you have ATP 500 tournaments. That's where if you win it, you get 500 points.
Yeah.
Still fairly good, but that's where you stop seeing the top players entering. Someone like Nadal or Federer or Djokovic.
Just be like a waste of time and energy.
There are 9 1000 tournaments a year. There are 4 Grand Slams a year. You're going to probably play the ATP finals. If you're in the top 8, you will. You've only really got time to play 1 or 2 500s maybe to sort of prepare for ATP 1000. So
it's like the mock exam.
Yeah, it's like the mock exam. You have one in Beijing, for example, just before you've got the ATP 1000 in Shanghai. So maybe the week before you'll play the Beijing one to get used to they're on hard court, to get used to the surface, to get used to being in China, and to acclimatize a bit, time zones and stuff. Because that is crazy.
Yeah, the flying time zones and everything, yeah.
But yeah, it's unreal. And then you have the 250s, which you never really see top players enter, unless it's just like the absolute like nutty guys who play every tournament they can. Like there's one guy, Dominic Thiem. He's currently ranked 3rd in the world. He just plays every tournament that he can enter. So yeah, those are the different levels of tournament on the ATP tour. And throughout the year, you're basically trying to customize your calendar to be as efficient as possible in getting as many points as you can. The last point of note on points is you want to it's a year rolling thing. So say Nadal won the French Open last year, right? So he won how many points winning the French Open?
2000? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't put you on the spot there.
Bad memory.
No.
Active recall. I can't forget that now. Now you have to ask me in 30 minutes?
Yeah, I'll ask you that. We'll do the Fibonacci thing. But yeah, so he won 2,000 points last year winning that tournament. This year, the French Open hasn't been played yet. So if you look at his ranking points, he has around 10,000 points. 2,000 of those are from the French Open. Say he loses the first match of the tournament this year, the French Open, his ranking points will go down by 2,000. He would have lost those points. Say he gets only to the final this year, but he doesn't win it. If you get to the final of a Grand Slam and you lose, you win 1,200 points. So Nadal's points in the total rankings will go down by 800, right? He's defending 2,000 points going into the French Open.
Yeah.
So you have it for 12 months. Until the tournament is next played, you retain those points. So in tennis, if you stop playing for 12 months, in theory, you will lose all of your points. It's insanely...
Wow. So if you have an injury and you're out for a year, it's just
it's so hard
to
build
start
momentum.
Back from square one.
Thankfully, they do protect your rankings to a certain extent if you're injured and stuff. But on the whole, you need to be very consistent through the year. And if Nadal last year won all the clay court tournaments, in March, April, May time, this year, going into that period, there's suddenly a little cluster of time where he's defending thousands of points. If he has a bad run of form, he will drop down the rankings very suddenly because, he had to defend all those points and he didn't. So it can be very brutal.
And so you mentioned, if you lose in a final of a Grand Slam, you get 1,200 points. Where do like the points start and stop along it? What if you get to semi-finals? Do you get
If you
points?
get to the semis, you get 720 points. Then if you get to the quarters, you get 360 and so on. If you get to the first round, the round of 128 players, you get 10 points.
Oh, so 0.
Or
is it fairly significant?
10,
I guess
10
lower
ATP
down.
points. It's good. It's good.
Okay, yeah.
Every little counts, honestly. It goes up like the curve is quite extreme. Only the top 10, 15, 20 players have loads and loads of points.
Okay.
So, for example, the last year, the player who ended the year in 20th had about 1,750 points. The 20th best player in the world. All you have to do to get that many points is win one ATP Masters 1000 tournament out of all the tournaments in the year, one 500 and one 250.
Yeah, not too bad.
You could lose every other match in the whole year.
Oh.
For 9 months of the year, you could lose every match and then just win those 3 tournaments and you're in the top 20 in the world.
I think tennis is my sport that I need to get on.
Yeah,
like,
just
that's
keep
my path to fame.
That one tournament, just
Yeah.
keep going every year, turning up, get better and better at that one tournament. And so obviously not many players win the tournaments, but you still get plenty of points going deep into a tournament.
Yeah.
So you get players who do well at certain tournaments, interesting storylines. So for example, Nadal or Federer, even though Nadal has won the most ATP Masters 1000 tournaments in history, he hasn't won all of the individual tournaments, if that makes sense. So for example, there's one Masters 1000 tournament at Monte Carlo in Monaco, and Nadal has won that, I think, 11 times on clay, obviously, whereas at Miami, which is on hard court, he's never ever won. So
wow.
You get very interesting storylines and stuff, and it's a fascinating sport. You can see it from many different angles, and there's a lot to talk about with it as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of sports, or all the big sports that are followed, they all tend to be team based, and I guess you have an element like an element of individuality in team sports. Like obviously, certain players in football teams are like carrying the entire team. Same with the NBA, or I mean, I don't know much about rugby. I think rugby is more intrinsic on the team to a certain extent, or am I just completely wrong?
No, it is. The dynamic is just completely different in those sports. So yeah, a team sport is just a completely different concept, and the way you train, the way you deal with it psychologically is just a completely different approach, which is so fascinating in its own right. But it makes tennis or other individual sports, and especially in tennis where you don't get coaching on court and things like that. It's just fascinating to watch a match.
It's truly isolated. It's like, I don't know. My knowledge on the sports outside of the main like pop culture kind of sports is very limited. For like the closest thing I can think about, the closest sport I can think that has the greatest level of individuality in terms of a team sport is basketball, because I think like truly in basketball, like a single person can literally just carry a game multiple times, like carry the entire team for the entire season.
I agree with that.
Whereas say in football, I mean, I'm not so well versed in football. I'm terribly versed in football, but I don't know. I just find it a lot harder that a single person can take over the game like they can in basketball. And
I think looking at it from a very simplistic point of view, you could argue that that's because in basketball, you do only have 5 players on the court.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's a smaller court. It's all more condensed. And everything.
So if you've got one person who's really good, it will show a lot more than in football. You can dilute it a little bit. You've got those 11 guys on the pitch, so or 11 guys on your team. So I think there's a case of that too. But it carries through with any sport as well. You do have like the individual approach to it and the team approach to it. And you have players who are individually really good, but on the team they're actually not that good, and vice versa. Some of the best players in like for example, Jordan Henderson, the Liverpool captain, he just won the Football Writers Association Player of the Season in the Premier League. But there would be very few people who would argue that he's the actual best footballer in the league. It's just that he makes the team better and he's so good for the team. So on an individual level, he is not the best footballer. But on the team level, then there's a strong argument that he's the best. So yeah.
Fair enough.
But yeah, tennis, I think it's hard to describe it from all angles concisely. And I hope I gave a fairly decent overview.
As in like my understanding of the entire system of tennis is a lot more informed now. Like I feel like I can actually just go and watch follow tennis at like a surface level and still have an idea of like kind of what's going on. The whole tie break thing that you were going on about earlier, like near the beginning, that shook me. Like the only time, the reason I started ringing huge bells is because like, from Wii Sports on tennis, I was like, tiebreak, what the hell is that? I don't care. Let me just flick my wrist and win this game.
I feel like that's so many people's experience of tennis is based on Wii Tennis.
Yeah, and yeah, so and. Yeah, I never knew. So like sometimes, you know, when I'm watching Wimbledon, they're like tie break or break point and stuff. And I'm just like, I have no idea what this means because I just didn't pay attention to the serving order. I knew there was a serving order, like one person serves for one game and then serves for the other. Similar to like, you know, badminton and obviously and table tennis. They have different systems in it. But yeah, I know there's a serving order, but I never really paid attention to it. I never really appreciated it enough. I mean, I played my fair share of table tennis, so I did appreciate it then. But yeah, in tennis, I just never really clocked it for some reason.
It's a very, very interesting element of the sport, and it's really, really important. Breaking serve is a fundamental part of each set. You have to break the opponent's serve at some point, whether that be via a game or in a tie break. You have to win points while they're serving. So yeah, I mean, that's like definitely added a new dimension to me watching tennis. So like, you know, next time Wimbledon comes around, whenever that is now, I'm definitely going to be looking at that. Like, it's an entirely new dimension that I never really... And that's why Federer fans will turn off at this point. Last year at Wimbledon, something crazy happened, which was Federer was winning... It went to the fifth set. And Federer won... To get to the fifth set, so it was 2 sets all against Djokovic. The 2 sets that Federer had won, he won quite easily. I think it was 6-1 and 6-3. The 2 sets that Djokovic had won were both tiebreakers, 7-6 and 7-6. So it was like, when it got tight, Djokovic won those 2 sets, but Federer overall had won more points. It got to the final deciding set. It was 8-7 to Federer because Federer broke Djokovic's serve, right? When it was 7-all. Became 8-7 Federer, and then he just had to win one more game, and he was serving. Federer has, in some ways, the best serve ever. Technically, his serve is insane, and the stats on how well he defends his serve, he gets broken so rarely. Then, in the game itself, when it was 8-7, he was 40-15 up. That means he only had one more point. He had 2 championship points on his own serve, and he lost both, then lost the game, then ended up going to a tiebreaker in the 5th set, and Djokovic won that tiebreaker. It is just painful.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's all based around the serve. And there's only one thing I feel like we didn't cover enough, which was how to win each individual game. If it goes to 40-all, then it's first to win 2 points, if that makes sense. You get advantage.
Yeah.
And then if you win the point after you've got an advantage, then you've won the game. That's just a little thing that I didn't explain. But
I mean, in the end, there's a whole host of technicalities in every sport. But
lots of nuances. But
wow, that's definitely something I'm probably going to read up on now, because I think even just reading up on it, like just trying to read up on it, like a lot of articles or blog posts or whatever that are designed to inform you, you're just like, you go straight over your head, because I guess they assume quite a lot of knowledge, but a certain amount of knowledge, at least from when I've tried looking into it. But I guess everything kind of makes a surface level understanding now in my brain. So, and
on a final note, if this is directed to the audience, if you're listening to this in your car or something right now or wherever, and you've kind of just been passively listening, I would just like to quickly pitch to you why it's worth following tennis now, specifically now, because tennis is at a really interesting point. It's never seen domination like it has over the last 15 years, with 3 guys, including Murray for a time as well, basically dominating the sport completely. Those guys are really old now, insanely old. We've never seen players this old doing what I sound like Trump. They're the oldest. They're tremendously old. No one is as old as these guys.
Stupendously. That's such a Trump word.
But there's something called the next gen in tennis. It's the young guys in their late teens, early 20s who are trying to break through. They're trying to break the old guard. They're trying to beat Federer, Nadal and Djokovic. They grew up basing their games on these guys. When the guys our age, you and I, we're 22. Federer won his first Grand Slam when I just turned 5 years old. So, these guys now grew up watching these guys, watching the big 3. It's at a massive crossroads. If you start watching tennis now, you're going to see the final pieces of the puzzle of the GOAT race between the big 3. You're going to see Federer, you're going to see Nadal and Djokovic playing, and always know that you followed the end of their careers. And then you're also about to see, it's a very unknown territory right now.
Just like the sudden spark of the next, big 3.
You don't know who's going to become the next best player. We genuinely, you don't know.
This is like a massive turning point in the history of tennis.
So 10 years ago, when those guys were all just at their peaks 7 or 8 years
It was
ago.
just like, yeah, next
you
10 years
knew
is just them.
The next 5 years, the next 10 years, yeah, it's just going to be them. But now it's like the stage is set. Who is going to be the first next gen player to win a Grand Slam? None of them have won a Grand Slam yet. Not a single player under 30 years old in men's tennis has won a Grand Slam. That is insane. Not one player has ever won a Grand Slam in the current lineup. Not one player.
Do you have anyone in mind that could potentially be that person, or is it that like just absolutely no idea kind of?
So there is like a little short list of guys who are in the running who've gone quite far into Grand Slams. The most likely one is Dominic Thiem, but he's not that young. He's I think 27. He's been in 3 finals now. He is knocking on the door. He's very likely to win one soon. But aside from that, out of the young guys, it's hard to tell. There are a few guys. One Tsitsipas, there's a guy called Medvedev, a guy called Zverev. Those guys all have a good chance, but who's next going to dominate the sport is very hard to see. So it's very fascinating watching each tournament now, watching the young guys try and establish themselves. So yeah, it's a cool time to start watching the sport.
Okay. And I guess my last question at this point, which, you know, might be potentially controversial, is one of these big 3 are going to have to break. Like one of them's going to have to break first and lose to that next gen person. Who do you think is, looking at their current stats or like their current state and stuff, the way they're playing or declining or something, who do you think is going to be the first one to lose to a next gen player?
Well, I guess it will probably be, my guess would be at the Australian Open or the US Open, one of the hard court slams.
Okay.
But Thiem is really good on clay, so it's hard to say. Arguably, well, what I would say is if you look at the last
answer.
If you look at from 2017, for example, this has been the winner of each Grand Slam. It's gone Federer, Nadal, Federer, Nadal, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, 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 Nadal, Djokovic, Nadal, Djokovic. No one, and in almost all of those, you don't have much consistency in the guys reaching the final. I don't know who's going to be first to crack. The other thing that I wanted to say quickly is that the reason why they're all going for so long is because of the legacy thing. Federer doesn't want to retire now because he knows that Nadal and Djokovic are likely to catch up. It's quite a rare thing. Normally in sport, you get to an older age and you've accomplished everything and then you can retire. The motivation factor drops. Now the motivation factor is more than ever.
Yeah.
Because they all want to, they've gone so far, they want to be the GOAT. If Federer retired now, he'll get overtaken quickly, arguably. Because
Nadal would only have to win one and then he's on the same level,
yes, exactly,
to a certain extent. And
Nadal and Federer both know Djokovic is not stopping anytime soon.
Yeah.
So they have a massive motivation right now. It's not like the young guys want it more. The old guys want it just as much still. They are just as hungry. So it's fascinating to watch. They will keep going for as long as they can. That's why you won't see Federer, I don't think, retire this year. You won't see Nadal retire for a while. You won't see Djokovic retire for a while. So the next gen have a real challenge. And also, you know, stepping onto a court and playing Roger Federer, playing Rafael Nadal.
That's just a massive psyche thing as well. Like
these older guys have a huge advantage psychologically as well. And the experience they have.
Yeah.
You can't put them in a position they've never been in before. Even when the young guys are playing the best match of their life. Don't worry, the old guys have dealt with that before.
Yeah.
It's incredible what they've done. They've maintained it, and yeah, it is a good time to start watching it because
over the next few years it's going to get spicy.
Yeah, it go and get spicy. So
well done.
Yeah, I hope I didn't ramble on too much. And if you are interested, again speaking to the audience, then obviously feel free to go and look up the stats, go and look up some great matches, and it's pretty easy to get up to speed if you want to just start from a Grand Slam tournament. Just follow the tournament, see who does well, watch the final, see the surprises, and yeah. And
I guess if you can't really play many other sports because of, or the team-based ones because of social distancing, pick up tennis. It's basically inherently a socially distant sport.
Yes.
As long as you're playing with 2 people. Playing doubles, that's another story.
Yeah, it's a whole other story.
But yeah, so pick it up, get into it. I guess it's a new thing to go down.
Yeah, it's a really good sport to play with the social distancing and stuff. And thank you for listening to me ramble. And of course, if the audience has any questions or anything that I didn't explain very well, then just let us know. I would like to know. I mean, it's tough because we haven't done this before. I don't know how to explain something that I'm really passionate about as simply as possible. I think there are elements that maybe weren't completely clear, but hopefully it wasn't too bad.
In the end, it's always impossible to try and cover everything about like a sport is such a big thing. There's just like it's difficult to cover every like single aspect. You can spend like 3 hours just talking about the pointing system, the whole psyche behind that, or obviously just the different types of surfaces. That's a topic on its own kind of thing. But I I think you definitely did a good job on getting that surface level kind of thing. I'm just going to toot your horn a bit just to make sure like you did good, Dan.
Thank you very much.
We are heavily inexperienced in this podcasting thing, but yeah, that's definitely opened a new eye for tennis for me at least. So I'll definitely try and get more into it. And then I guess at that, yeah, if you have any questions or thoughts or things that you'd like, or I guess Dan to cover in the topic of tennis, then just email us or at us or DM us on any kind of social media, and with that we'll just leave it there. Peace. Thank you for listening to this episode of Getting It.
If you enjoyed this episode
or didn't,
then feel free to leave us a rating and review on the Apple Podcasts app or on the Apple Podcasts website.
We'd love to hear your thoughts, ideas or questions about anything we discussed, so feel free to email us at thoughts@gettingit.co.uk.
You can also reach us on Twitter or Instagram at gettingit_pod.
You can find all the links in the show notes.